The Bills roster has transitioned quite a bit, and the defensive backs were a notable piece of that equation. What should we expect from the new look unit in 2024? We're breaking down all the dynamics surrounding the Bills secondary entering the season today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, welcome in. Excited to break down the Buffalo Bills secondary entering 2024. A position group on this team that has experienced quite a bit of transition. Now, no greater transition has happened at any position more than the wide receivers, but I think the secondary is where you saw the second most transition on the roster. So we're going to attack this conversation through three different lenses: what I'm excited about, what I'm concerned about, and what I'm curious about. It'll be very similar to the conversation we had yesterday regarding the linebackers. So let's dive into it. And folks, next week, the Bills are at training camp. They report, there's practices. We made it, right? The offseason conversations are going to be behind us, and we're going to be talking very much about what this team is and what's happening surrounding the practices, the roster transactions, the preseason, all of that. So feels good to have new information to break down, right? We can stop speculating. We can get into what's really going down with this football team. But one final preview conversation, if you will. Let's talk secondary and what I'm most excited about. And that conversation for me starts with this cornerback tandem, Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. I'm very excited about that duo. I think that's a really good pair. And maybe it's not the ceiling of vintage Trey White in either player, but you can make perhaps a case that the combination of these two guys is as steady of a pair that McDermott's had in Buffalo. Christian Benford, a good-looking young player. I did an entire episode breaking down Christian Benford on June 6th. Highly encourage you to check that out if you missed it, where we went at least a half an hour just talking about Christian Benford and how good he is as a young player, how clean of a fit he is, how good of a tackler, how sound he is in zone, how he can play the ball. I think Benford's going to be a high-level starter for this defense for a very, very long time. And so he's entering his third season. He's extension eligible after the year. And it just feels like he has the makeup of a guy that's going to be around for a long time. And I think this is going to be an important season for him. I think he's shown us through 2 years what he's capable of. And I'm not really concerned about what the floor of his play is. I know what the floor of his play is. I'm excited about finding out what the ceiling is. And I think we'll get a full understanding of that this year. But I like what I've seen so far. And I think he's still a very much an ascending young player. So that's one half of the outside corner duo. The other one's Rasul Douglas. That dude's a baller. You saw it. Everyone's all excited that the Bills traded for him. And boy, oh boy, did he deliver right away. The impact that he made on the defense was significant in unusual circumstances as a guy brought over in the middle of the season, being able to step in and make plays. big-time tackles, taking away the football, whether it's recoveries of fumbles, interceptions. I mean, the guy did it all. He had a tangible impact on this defense. And what was cool is you listen to him talk during OTAs, and he pretty much said, I just did whatever Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde told me to do. Like, didn't really know the scheme, didn't really understand the coverage spacing rules. He just did whatever Poyer and Hyde, or I always do that. I cross them up. Hyde and Poyer did whatever he told him to do. And so now he comes in fully understanding what his role is, what the defense is, and it's a contract year for him. And we'll talk more about those dynamics a little bit later on, but I think you have a lot of things pointing at Rasul Douglas having a really, really strong campaign for the Buffalo Bills in 2024. So I'm excited about that duo of Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. I'm also excited about Taron Johnson. And again, I think you know exactly who Taron Johnson is in the NFL. Coming off of a all-pro season in the slot. We've talked a lot about his role and his impact on the defense as a full-time, every snap player in the slot, and how it's this hybrid role of having to play second-level defense as a linebacker, but also cover. And with how the Bills space the field, a lot of the opportunities are kind of funneled towards Taron Johnson, and he delivers time and time again. He's a high-impact football player. But what's fascinating to me about Taron Johnson this year is this is his secondary, right? Like, this is his group. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White no longer around. He's the one that is still around, signed an extension. Right? That's different than the other guys. 2 of the 3 were cut, and then Micah Hyde had an expired contract. This is Taron Johnson's group. He's the elder statesman there. And I think I've always felt like Taron Johnson was a guy that could bring a lot of leadership to the equation. And I think he's had plenty of time to position himself for the type of role that he's in this year, not only expecting high-level performance, but to be kind of the glue piece and the leader of this group. So excited for Taron Johnson in 2024. How about Kaiir Elam? I think there's some dynamics here that certainly make me excited. Obviously, a first-round pick, physically gifted, has had some really good moments. I think the reality of the Kaiir Elam situation is it's less about Kaiir Elam and more about Christian Benford and what Christian Benford's been able to prove and do. Where Kaiir Elam, I think there might be some trust issues in terms of the staff really believing that he can go out there and execute the techniques that they want him to do. But when he has played, let's not act like he hasn't played well. Significant plays made by Kaiir Elam over his first 2 seasons as a guy that really hasn't been a starter. Whether it's the interception in the playoffs as a rookie against Miami, the big tackle against Miami in the playoffs. I'm not sure the Bills win that game without those 2 plays. The interception he had of Patrick Mahomes in the red zone as a rookie was at week 6. The Bills were able to win that game. Thought he played great in that football game. This past season, coming in and having a huge interception in the red zone against Pittsburgh, a play that I felt kept the momentum with the Bills as it felt like it might have been shifting a little bit towards Pittsburgh. I think it's been pretty good. And in so many ways, this feels like a fresh start for him. He's back to his college number, wearing number 5. Felt like maybe he wasn't in the good graces of John Butler, who's been the secondary coach. And I think John Butler's an awesome secondary coach. I'm not casting any shade at him whatsoever, but for whatever reason, it felt like those guys weren't necessarily aligned. And with John Butler now coaching in Nebraska, Kaiir Elam, a fresh start with a new corners coach, new defensive coordinator, and Bobby Babich, feels like a fresh start. Now, I don't think he's going to start this season, right? So measuring his growth is going to be more if he plays, right, which would mean an injury to Benford or Douglas. And that's certainly possible. As I've said repeatedly, Dane Jackson has never been a starter for this Bills defense, but over the last 3 years, he started 26 games. So there's been plenty of run for the CB3. Hopefully, Douglas and Benford are healthy all season long and we don't really get to see them. But during camp and preseason, we'll get a look at him. And I think there's going to be messaging throughout the season that will indicate to us where Kaiir Elam is at. And so I've got my eye towards 2025 as really the year where he starts. And we'll get into that in the next segment as we consider Rasul Douglas in a contract year and if there's a long-term plan there. But it could be a situation where Kaiir Elam gets that opportunity in 2025. And while that's not necessarily maximizing the rookie deal, the book's not written on Kaiir Elam. And I think there's going to be that opportunity for him to play and perhaps be a starter for a season and still one of the youngest players on this roster. So I'm excited for the future with Kaiir Elam, even if it's going to be hard to measure this year where he falls. I think the book is far from written. So those are some of the leading things that I'm excited about with the secondary. There's still one more item, and that's Cole Bishop. I want to talk about Cole Bishop and what I'm concerned about with this Bills secondary on the other side of it, folks, so be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Folks, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, one carryover talking point from segment one as I wrap up the what I'm excited about piece of this conversation is Cole Bishop as a rookie. And I'm excited to see specifically how he factors in. Is he a starter? If he's not a starter, is there a role for him as the third safety? I'm fascinated to find out, but I think there's a lot of ceiling with Cole Bishop. Now, I'll tell you specifically why I think there's ceiling with Cole Bishop, but the first thing that I do want to say is this is a significant investment in a safety. And Sean McDermott is very accustomed to getting high-level performance out of safeties, but not necessarily guys that have a ton of pedigree. He's made a living out of getting impact out of safeties that were late-round draft picks, that were modest-level free agent signings, thinking about Mike Mitchell and Quentin McKell and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and Trey Boston. There's a long list of guys that have been able to do this for the Bills and Panthers and Eagles. Kurt Coleman. There's so many examples of this. But this is a second-round pick. And so the investment in the position combined with the resume that Sean McDermott has, I'm excited. Now when you kind of just focus in on who Cole Bishop is, there's a lot to be intrigued with. a 3-year starter, 29-game starter for Utah. Ton of splash play production in college. 21.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, 4 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble. 6'2", 206 pounds, RAS score of a 988. Perfect score is a 10. And this guy is big, athletic, and has been productive in college. And thinking about the player I scouted at Utah, a lot of versatility, over 1,700 career snaps, over 800 of those in the box, 400 as a deep safety, 428 in the slot, 69 at corner. And he's a very aggressive, athletic player. My favorite moments of watching Cole Bishop at Utah was when he's able to attack and play forward and work in the box, trigger, fire that gun, get into the alley and make tackles. Knife through creases and make tackles. Super physical player. Unrelenting effort. Brings a lot as a blitzer and a gap shooter. But I also like some of the man coverage reps that I saw with him defending tight ends one-on-one, and got a lot of short area quickness and instincts for covering. You've heard Cole Bishop and Dalton Kincaid talk about those matchups when they were together at Utah. And both of them will tell you that Cole Bishop got the better of Dalton Kincaid in a lot of one-on-one reps. I think there's a lot of ways that Cole Bishop can help this defense. And I think he is the ceiling of this safety situation. I'm not sure how much of that comes to fruition this year, but the long-term plan that obviously includes Cole Bishop is pretty intriguing to me, because the physical upside here is pretty significant. So yes, I'm very excited about Cole Bishop and how he can factor into the mix, which is a good transition into things that I'm concerned about, because the leading conversation for me here is how the safety situation comes together and how they all perform. Safeties have been a very important piece of the success of the Bills defense. And I know that we're disappointed with some playoff performances from the defense, but in non-playoff games against the Chiefs and Bengals, so every other playoff game plus the regular season under Sean McDermott, the defense has been really good. And you know that safety play has been a big part of that. Of course, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Well, folks, those guys aren't running through the door anymore. And for as good as that duo was, and I think it's legendary, the last 2 years we haven't really seen it. Micah Hyde's battled injuries. Jordan Poyer's battled injuries. I think you saw some age on both of them last season. So for as good as they were, we haven't really seen vintage Poyer and Hyde in probably 3 years. So it's not like a recent dynamic that the Bills are no longer going to have. Now, I think there's a lot to be said for the leadership that they bring, the understanding of the system, right? That certainly matters, even if they are lesser versions of themselves. So I'm not going to diminish that piece of what they bring. But how does this come together without them? You've heard Sean McDermott come out and say straight up, this is Taylor Rapp's room. He's the guy that played the most last year, obviously, of the returning players, that signed the 3-year extension, that feels like he's in the good graces of the Bills' defensive coaching staff. So he's going to be one of your starters. And I look at Taylor Rapp as more of a guy that is best when playing closer to the line of scrimmage, can play forward, can be physical, can tackle. I don't know that he has the best deep zone coverage skills or that has the most coverage range. And I don't think he played his best football last year for the Bills. Now, I was very excited about Taylor Rapp at Washington. I liked him with the Rams. He's a guy that I wanted the Bills to sign to be a starter. I just wish he played better last year. And I think there's some things working against Taylor Rapp last season, whether that was his own personal dynamics. He's come out and said that it was a challenging year for his life. And I think we can examine normal human beings, right? These are regular people. Sometimes you have tough circumstances, personal, that shows up in your work, right? That's probably happened to all of us at some point. Football players are no different. They're regular humans. But also having to play this role where early in the season, it felt like the team wanted him to be a true third safety and factor in with sub packages. And so now he's going to do that. But then Tyrel Dotson has to start because Matt Milano goes down, and now Taylor Rapp's playing deep safety on long and late downs while Poyer goes to the second level. And you're like, well, maybe there's plenty of reasons why Taylor Rapp didn't play his best football, because the role was extremely strange all season long, not to mention his own personal dynamics. The player that I think complements Taylor Rapp is I put it in Sharpie that he's a starter. The guy that I think brings the most complementary skill set is Mike Edwards. And I really like Mike Edwards. I think his tape with the Bucs, his tape with the Chiefs is very good. Ball production, I think he's versatile. There's a lot that I like about Mike Edwards. And he's the guy that I think I trust the most to play in deeper alignments. Now, if you remember the description that I gave for Cole Bishop, athletic, man coverage, but also a guy that I think is best the closer he is to the line of scrimmage. So it feels like on one hand, Rapp and Bishop are very much the preferred guys, but do they complement each other well enough, and is Cole Bishop ready? I feel like Cole Bishop's a guy that we just haven't heard much about throughout the spring with OTAs and minicamp. Getting a feel for Cole Bishop and where he's at is going to be one of my primary objectives through training camp, because I just don't know where he's at. It felt like there's just no commentary about his role and how he was performing. So who starts? Who's the third safety? Is there a role for the third safety? It's fascinating. It's very, very interesting to me. Now, I love the depth, because one of those three is not going to start, and I think that becomes a strong depth player, not to mention Cam Lewis, who has a lot of time on task, Damar Hamlin, and Dee Delaney. Dee Delaney's not a nothing player. He's been a rostered player for a number of seasons. It's had a lot of special teams impact. He's not a nothing player. And then Damar Hamlin's fascinating because, his circumstances last season couldn't have been more strange with the situation in Cincinnati, everything that came after that. I can only imagine what that whirlwind was like for Damar Hamlin, not to mention mentally going back on a football field where, you were in a really tough spot. He should be a lot better positioned to help the team this year. But is there a path for him to make the roster? If you think Rapp, Edwards, and Bishop are locks, and Cam Lewis is this versatile player that helps on special teams, can play every spot in the secondary, and they want to keep him, if they don't roster five safeties, then where does Damar Hamlin fit in? Can he beat out Cam Lewis? Does Dee Delaney have a legitimate path to this roster? So how it all shakes out is something I'm concerned and curious about. So that's a big piece of this conversation. I got one more thing that I'm concerned about before I talk about what I'm curious about. We'll get to all of that here in the final segment today, so be sure to stick with me. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so that you can start living your best life. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who have experienced major trauma. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. All right, one more talking point in the what I'm concerned about bucket before we talk about what I'm curious about. The last thing here is the fourth outside corner. We know that Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas are your starters. Kaiir Elam is CB3. CB4 on the outside, maybe it's Cam Lewis, but it feels like Jamarcus Ingram is going to be the guy. doesn't really have a lot of competition. Kyron Brown, probably his most meaningful competition. And he's been around for a couple of seasons on the practice squad. I thought he was really good in the preseason. I've liked watching him at training camp practices. Still a guy that we haven't really seen much from. And so, again, we're talking about CB4. I don't want to put, too much into this, right? No sirens should be going off about your CB4, but he's just a very unproven player. And I think what makes me feel some type of way is that he's an unproven player that in some ways feels like the door just couldn't be more wide open for him to earn a roster spot. And maybe he's shown enough in 2 years for the Bills to feel comfortable with that. But, I mean, there's a world where Jamarcus Ingram is part of the active game day roster and plays meaningful snaps, at least in special teams. And, he's only a few snaps away from having to play on defense. So we'll see how that shakes out. Let's get into what I'm curious about. And the lead conversation here for me is a player that I don't feel like is getting enough attention, and that's one of the draft picks. Day 3 pick, Daequan Hardy, corner out of Penn State, a slot corner. But there's something about this guy that really intrigues me. 5'9", 180 pounds, 30-inch arms, so he's not like a big guy. He's a slot corner. Super explosive, 4.38 40-yard dash, 42.5-inch vertical jump. Dude's explosive. I really enjoyed watching his tape. Super competitive player. One of those smaller corners that plays above his weight class, flies around, very assertive tackler, hunts the football. Easy movement skills, right? He's springy and explosive. I thought he was pretty instinctive in coverage. Had some tough assignments there. One of the games I watched from last season was Ohio State. I thought he played well. And on top of, I think, being a good slot player that is explosive, he became Penn State's punt returner in 2023 and did very well. Had 17 punt returns, averaged 14.6 yards, which is outstanding, had 2 return touchdowns. And you know me, I care so much about not just your ability to return and create explosive returns. How good are you as a ball handler? Well, he fielded 17 punts and returned them. He also had 10 fair catches. So 27 opportunities to field a punt, had no muffs. And again, it's a small sample size, but in his first 27 opportunities to catch a punt, he handled it. And so I'm curious to see how he factors in, because if he's the punt returner, he's going to be an active player on game day. And I think there's a lot of ceiling there. So not that I expect him to even come close to making it an interesting conversation in the slot, because Taron Johnson is that guy. I think he can be a good depth player, which has been necessary. I think we've had a lot of conversations like, what happens if Taron Johnson goes down? Is it Saran Neal? Is it Cam Lewis? Is either of them good enough? Well, here's a new option. Not to mention what I think he can be as a punt returner. So that's one of the lead things that I'm curious about is Daequan Hardy and what opportunity he has as a rookie. The next thing is what happens at outside corner in 2025. Rasul Douglas, this is a contract year for him. He turns 29 in August. What are the plans beyond this season? I think there's 2 variables that matter in that conversation. One is, how well does Rasul Douglas play? And number 2 is, what do we learn about Kaiir Elam? If Kaiir Elam is ready to go, well, then I think you just say goodbye to a guy that plays corner and is going to be in his age 30 season next year, right? You say, thanks for everything. You are a great trade deadline acquisition, and let's see what happens. Maybe there's a dollar amount that it makes sense to bring him back, but if Kaiir Elam's ready, you'd love to see him be that guy. So do they extend Rasul Douglas? It kind of feels like they were going to do that. They would have done it this offseason when the contract was very favorable to kind of disperse some money around and create some cap space. They took a different approach to it. Actually added some void years to the end of the deal. So the long term at corner opposite of Christian Benford's fascinating, whether it's Rasul Douglas or Kaiir Elam. What does an extension look like? Is Kaiir Elam ready to go? And the last thing is there a move coming at safety? So I talked about how I'm a little bit concerned about how it all comes together and what the right pair of guys to have is. Is the answer some other guy? Is it Micah Hyde? The door's not closed. We know that. And as many have said, the longer the door remains open, the more it feels possible that he comes back. Do the Bills want him to come back? Is he effective? Do you want that leadership? Does it get in the way of the transition that you've embraced, right? You feel like you're kind of keeping one toe in the water that you just got out of. Is he the best option to play free safety opposite of Taylor Rapp? Like, there's a lot to consider there. So is it Micah Hyde? Is it Justin Simmons? Is it Quandre Diggs? Is it the guys they have? It'll be fascinating to find out, but speculation season is coming to an end. And I enjoy speculation season, but there's nothing quite like breaking down real news, real football games, real tape. It's all coming very, very soon. We made it, folks. Training camp is next week. We're going to break it all down. Busy stretch coming up here on the podcast. There's going to be a lot of new content. I'm going to post it as soon as it's done, so make sure that you are subscribed. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribed and hit the bell. Make sure that you know exactly when new videos are posted, because there's going to be quite a bit of it as I do everything that I can to keep you incredibly informed and ready for everything that's going to happen this season as we navigate training camp and the preseason in the coming weeks. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you'll come back. Hit the subscribe button. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.